Well, we'll go ahead and get started today. Happy New Year and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mary Price, and I'm the Events and Marketing Director at the Shingo Institute at Utah State University. And today we're learning from one of our faculty fellows, Cheryl Jekyll, on building system capabilities. She wrote an article in our December newsletter on this topic, and you can find that by visiting our website at shingo.org/articles. And with that, Cheryl, I'm going to turn over the time to you right now.
Thanks, Mary. Well, I'm excited to be here. Happy New Year, everybody. I was just telling Mary, I just got home on Sunday night, so just getting back in the saddle like many of you are. The good news is today I'm going to be leaving you with at least a very specific tool that hopefully you'll get some use out of. So I always try and make sure if people are going to come to a webinar in the middle of the day that you get something out of it. Quick agenda, I'm going to go through what the problem is we're trying to solve, what some of the challenges are, how to foster a learning culture, and then I'm going to leave you with this tool and what it is and how to use it.
Cheryl, let me interrupt for just a moment. For our podcast listeners out there, I'm going to go ahead and include the link to the document that you are going to talk about and explain in the summary for the podcast. So just heads up, go there so you can follow along.
So with that, I have a background in both continuous improvement and human resources. And so even from my own personal experience, I've certainly seen many years of investing sometimes a lot of time and money and resources into a training program, and it just doesn't deliver. It either doesn't deliver from the beginning or it delivers up front, and then before you know it, it just doesn't. It's the behaviors are leaving as fast as you try and put them in. If that's true of any of you on this webinar, you are not alone. That's really kind of considered the standard. This article here leads off with this idea of the great training robbery. It's out of a Harvard Business Review article, Why Leadership Training Fails. So it's kind of an interesting article if you want to look that up. One of the statistics, and there's many in the article, that just a simple one that I wanted to point out from a Harvard Business Review article in 2019, also on how training fails to meet needs, is that only 12% of employees apply the skills they've learned out of the programs they go through. Whether you look at this statistic or another, they're generally all like most of it isn't working. So I'm going to leave all of you to consider your own experiences with the training you need. Now, one of the things I think is interesting in the Shingo community, you're all probably in organizations that having people learn skills is a core aspect of being able to put in continuous improvement. People need to learn new behaviors and be able to apply them consistently. Having worked in this since I was in my mid-20s, I have seen many, many years, many organizations continually struggling with how do we get this training in place so that people are doing the work. One example I'll use today is of problem-solving skills. It's not by any means every type of skill people learn, but it's a common one that I see people trying to build in. And I myself, when I was in private industry, which I have been most of my career, have continued to see the difficulty and the struggle to get people to be able to apply problem solving beyond when they're trained to do it. So after 25 years of doing this, which 25 is on the light side, I got tired of purchasing and developing training that doesn't work. I had seen it happen over and over and over again. It just it just makes me mad, and I'm just plain sick of it. So after this, as I had gotten to a place, I was working for the state of Illinois. It was the first thing I did when I came out of private industry, is I was working with a team of people that I knew, and we were putting in leadership development training to support the continuous improvement work. So we were putting in lean, and we needed these basic continuous improvement skills and a leadership program that supported that. So we put in a half a year of building the program, we put it out, and guess what? Not a whole lot changed. It just didn't really seem to make a difference. After going through all that and seeing one more time, see, this time I didn't purchase it, I developed it. And so it was even worse with all that time developing it. So That led me to building a better mousetrap, which I rebuilt over and over and over again. And today I'm going to share it with you. But the good news is I'm not going to teach you anything you don't know already. So I'm not here to tell you stuff you don't know. I'm going to remind you of things you already know, and I'm going to show you how I do that. I'm also going to give you a tool that will help you remember what you know, and then present a way for your team to remember what you know, meaning this doesn't help if you're the only one who gets it. So there's some mechanisms to bring other people with you. By the way, this essence of realizing I'm not teaching you anything today was at the heart of the work. So when some of you are thinking, well, how would we improve it? The answer still lies in the knowledge of your team. They actually know their way out of there, but we don't generally have the entire team help build out the mechanisms of how to do things better. So here's some of the challenges that I've seen, both from my own experience and certainly in others that I'm around. Believe it or not, people still say when they look at what's not going right, they say, we need a complete plan, because they're like, you know what, we have the training, but we don't really have a plan. We need resources. We need to practice. We need to apply the training. And you mean we need to follow up? I ask the questions this way, not because people don't know the answer, but even they kind of seem when they look at what's not working, we're solving the problem, they often say, I realize that these are questions I haven't answered. So let's go take them just to take a minute per each one to give you a sense of what exactly I'm talking about. So the tool even you're going to get today has a lot to do with getting enough rubber on the road to get off the ground with getting that sustainable learning. So a lot of times when I'm working with teams, what they'll say when it's all said and done is, we just haven't put the time and energy into making a complete plan. We have a partial plan or not much of a plan. And so what's missing is kind of obvious that it wouldn't be enough to be successful. The second thing is, I will say this much. I was just also talking to Mary about it before we started. I've gone back to school. And the reason I went back to college at my age was because I wanted what I've seen work and I am seen be successful. I haven't understood what the science behind it is. And what I have found is there's a tremendous amount of research, lots of documentation about what's needed for the learners to learn. This is not a new idea. It's that this type of information is not at everybody's fingertips. I'm going to go through some of the highlights today about what's important for learners to be successful so that when we have these training efforts, we get where we want to go. The next piece that comes up is a very common challenge is a lot of times people have been trained in something, and the idea is if they were trained, they can do it. And yet most of the time we're all well aware that most things anybody learns, much less skills, being competent and good at something, takes practice and a lot of it. And then once people get trained, the other thing, again, this partly comes from the research, is they're not sufficiently applying it. So like I've been trained in problem solving, but when and how I do the problem solving is not clear. Maybe we did one round in the training. That is not a skill. That is not application. So we need to put almost as much time, if not more, into what to do with the skills instead of the training as kind of the goal of it. My sense is many of you, as I'm saying this, are like, yep, I knew that. That makes sense. And last, but by no means least, a lot of what shows up to be the problem is that the leadership teams are not aligned. That whatever we're trying to train people to do, any change in behavior does not have clear alignment to the strategy, and certainly clear alignment through the levels. A lot of times it's like one layer is trying to put it in and they don't have everyone lined up. And it's not whether people said, yep, it's fine to go do that thing. That's not what we're talking about. If we want people's behaviors to change, usually takes a much more congruent systemic movement. So the next piece that's usually missing is the systems that support the daily management systems are not aligned to these behaviors. And so hence, we can try and build a new behavior, even train to it, but it won't hold up if the systems in the environment don't match it. And really, more often than not, they don't. So, as I mentioned earlier, if any of these challenges sound familiar, you are not alone. They are actually, someone said to me the other day, why wasn't someone successful? And I said, I'm not surprised at all when people aren't successful. The truth is, what it takes to be successful takes some real focus and effort and a steadfastness on how you apply resources. So it takes a lot, but there is a path. So the first thing that I'm going to mention here is that we need to foster a culture of learning, meaning it's clear that everything we're doing requires learning. And so looking at what does that take? The first piece that I commonly see that people get a lot of mileage out of is getting more clear, what does my team need to know to do what I'm expecting of them? And it may sound very simple, but believe it or not, there is a lot of vagueness when it comes to this. It's like, I want them to do daily management. Well, what does that mean? The way I would start thinking about this is, what would they be doing if they were doing what I need them to do? So the idea of what they need to know ties to what they need to do. But what I'm saying is visualize it in your mind. So if you think about anything that you do not see today that you want to see in your teams, ask yourself if it's clear to even you what exactly they need to be doing. The next question is, do they know it? And so this question of what do they need to know, which ties to what they need to do, is something, again, very often we need to give more thought to the clarity of that answer. Exactly what do we mean? The other thing I would suggest is a lot of times we compact behaviors into words like problem solving, like I want them to do problem solving. Well, there's lots of sub behaviors to that. We have to get clear on a problem statement. We need to do root cause analysis. We might need to brainstorm what all the problems within the problem are. We'll need to make choices of what to analyze, how to gather facts, how to establish a change, then implement changes, and then monitor that changes are happening. There's lots packed into a word. Again, another common thing is we say they just need to know problem solving, but we haven't pulled apart and unpacked what's inside of that. And then the next thing I would say, first and foremost, stop accepting anything less than sustainable capabilities. So if your training efforts are not delivering the goods, if you are not getting sustainable skills and the capabilities that you're looking for, make sure you're not participating in the problem. So if you're going to provide training, do what it takes to build capabilities in the long run. So first I found we have to insist nothing else will do. But whatever it requires, but why do it if we're not going to get to where we need to go? So that would be the first lesson. I would say my learnings really changed when I finally just said, I'm not participating in this more. I'm not willing to put things in or stop trying until they actually really work. And while that's taking a lot of cycles of learning, and I'm sure it would for you as well, when we stop trying, we've kind of accepted it failed when it's really just a matter, what did we learn and try it again? What did we learn and then try it again? So we want to take, as Shingo thought is part of the Shingo system, we always want to be thinking a systems approach to things. So if we want to see the right behaviors, we need the systems to drive it. So with that, when it comes to training, and how to think of it from a systemic point of view, we want to be thinking about where we begin, what happens before training. Then we're going to talk about what the training events might need to look like. And then most importantly, not least, it's what happens afterwards. So when we begin with the end in mind, you might want to be thinking about, how do we assess individual readiness? There's a considerable amount of research that points to when people aren't ready for a training, either they don't see the why of it, they're not clear for any number of reasons. Maybe they don't have the time, or they're not prepared to, maybe it's an analytical skill set and they're not prepared to be learning that. For any number of reasons, when the learner's not ready, then it doesn't surprise us the training doesn't work well. So how do we assess people's readiness? Then we also, from the very beginning, before we get in the water, we want to set very specific and measurable goals for the training. And last, this is something I found a great deal of satisfaction in implementing, is involving everyone in the planning. So we want to be careful that just a few people designed it, a few people are in charge, and everyone's just going to like follow along. Learning is a very active process. And so having everyone engaged in your planning and learning helps everyone get on track because they're part of the process. It's not happening to them. They're in the process of participating in it. So now we're in the actual events themselves, which again, it's important that they're done right, because obviously when they're not, it's a problem, but it's by no means the ball game. So the other thing to be thinking about, training is certainly not just an event. However, when you're going to do it, make sure you've included a vision for it. When I found from working with groups, they often, when they look at different training programs they have, they're clear that the people in the training are not clear why they're in the training. The purpose is not clear. And when people aren't clear the why of it, then they really generally will not look at what behavior changes they're going to need to make, much less stick with the behavior change. The next thing, as I've mentioned earlier, consider what people will need to be able to do and what they need to know. Again, surprisingly, a lot of training, if you said to the people participating, even the leadership that championed it, what will the learners be able to do? They're not clear about that. They're like, I don't know what they'll be able to do. And if they're going to be able to do it, what would they need to do? What would they need to know to do it? The reason why that matters is it's important if I do something that I have an understanding of it, which again, I doubt is new to any of you. And then remembering learning is an active process. For instance, in the program, this would apply to any training. The program that I built, it was first I taught it, and then we started having the trainers teach it. And then what we really found, the leaders who needed to coach it needed to train it. And then what we found in front of my very eyes, I witnessed this over and over again, people said until they were delivering the training, they realized they hadn't learned it at all. And the difference was when they had to decide to train it, they decided to learn it, which is a very active process. So they made up their mind to actually learn it because they weren't going to stand in front of their own teams and tell them something they're not sure about. What that showed me is too much of the training we provide is too passive. Even when people are in a session that they think was great and interesting, if they haven't had an active role in it, that doesn't mean they've learned anything they can apply. It just means they've had an interesting experience. So one of the reasons why I think so much of it just comes in and dissipates in hours, if not days, is it wasn't nearly active enough. Now, once we've had good events and we've started to upgrade that, and the tool again I'm going to give you is going to help you do that, we're going to want to make sure that we have the processes in place that support those behaviors and skills. It was interesting. I participated in one fairly big 3-day event. And when it was all said and done, what we realized is the after training supports were not in place. They were clearly not in place. And so then it became clear we should have spent probably way more than 3 days preparing so that we didn't put in a 3-day program that is not ready to have what it needs on the backside of it. So I'd encourage you to think that through. And if it's not ready, then there's still no point in running the training exercises. The second piece is you almost always need some type of coaching afterwards, meaning people have had a learning experience, but they need coaching. But here's where people get stuck at. They don't have who are the coaches and are they ready to coach? So if those two answers aren't in place, again, at every layer in that leadership team, then we need to be thinking that out ahead of time, maybe the order we train or how we get people ready. But remember, coaching a skill is not the same as doing a skill. That means if I'm coaching a skill, I'm adept at how to work with the learner, how to see where they're at, how to support them. It's not the same thing. Last, is anything needed to build that skill that should be put in place? So this, again, you're looking for any other system that is needed to support that skill. So if you think about problem solving, we think about identifying problems and changing and improving problems until we have a solution put in place. Here's a common area that we are missing the systems about where the new standard work would happen, what else would be put in place to make sure any new change is going to hold up over time. So if it's more than a training event, we want to be thinking about what else is needed to make sure things hold up. Now, here's the next piece that I've seen. I would not have guessed this. This is not what I would have ever thought was required of effective training, but it is something I've witnessed so many times and in such an impactful way. This is part of the reason why I went back to school. I wanted to thoroughly understand what is it I'm seeing. I think learning by the way it is structured tends to be discouraging. So we have a way we normally behave, and then we try and do a new behavior, and we get discouraged. It's maybe not easy. We try and we fail. Community makes a huge difference in how people are able to get through any of that discouragement and be able to move forward. The other thing research shows is people are very reluctant to have a new skill or a new behavior, and they're the only ones. So if you have 10% of an environment going through, they're going to be reluctant to have a new behavior other people don't have. So that's another reason why community is required. So what we want to be thinking about, to what degree are my learners part of a broad community, and what do we do to help them feel connected to each other? And what do I mean by that? It's really as simple as sometimes an hour of time together where they're talking about the problems they're facing, how the learning is going, if there's new behaviors, who's succeeding, who's not. And here's where I found the critical component is. When they come out of those conversations and go, I'm not the only one struggling, their ability to stay at it as a group is considerably more successful than any of them have ever done that apart. So again, that's generally not that costly. It's an hour of their time, and mostly it's giving them a time and a place to talk about it. Not that we need to structure workshops or have support from the outside or anything like that. So this is a really powerful piece, and I'd encourage you to explore how you might put that in place. So as we've talked about, it's more than a training event. So we're going to need a plan for how we apply that learning. When, where, and how will the skills be applied? And again, who at which level is exactly doing what? I use a matrix in some ways to say what are each level, and then exactly what are those expectations? Because again, if a skill doesn't attach to an actual expectation, then it just exists as like training with no real purpose. So do you have clear expectations? Then how do the skills need to be applied? And then what's all the coaching and follow-up that goes with it? Last but not least, how will you be recognizing and positively reinforcing the skills that you're trying to build in? Again, it's not probably news to you. People are more impacted by positive reinforcement than any other way. So it's not how do we correct them, it's a matter of how do we continue to recognize all the right behaviors we're looking for. So now we're going to get to the tool. This is the piece that you're going to be able to take with you so that everything we've talked about here, you can move forward. The first thing I'm going to talk about is what's the purpose of it and then how to use it. But I want to tell you the purpose. It's helpful to figure out how it was built, because this is a step any of you can take yourselves. The way this was originally built, when we first started to teach this, we kept teaching people what is effective training. But guess what? They didn't really need to be taught that, because if you ask people, almost any leadership team I've ever met anywhere, what is effective training? They know the answer to this question, especially if a group of them work on it. So if we just have them go up to flip charts or whiteboards and on the left side put every last current problem they have in training, and they just make an exhaustive list of it. And then on another flip chart or on the right side of the board, they put everything they know what is required for effective training. What I've seen 10 out of 10 times, they can put together a pretty good list. So while I'm going to be giving you a tool, I want to be clear, your teams could develop this tool without any help. So I'm giving you a quick way to get there, but I don't think it's a waste of time for the teams to see that they do know what's a better answer, but that they're not following it. And the tool is one way to help close that gap because it helps people think it all the way through. So the tool covers 4 topics. The first is knowledge. So for whatever training you're looking at that you have today or you're going to be putting in, you want to be thinking through, do we know the why? How are we putting the why? How is the learner becoming clear on the why? There's a second why, which is for what's inside the training, why steps or processes are being followed. So it's always, again, for many of you with TWI backgrounds, if people don't have a why in their mind, it's also hard to absorb and retain information. So we want to make sure everything that we're doing, it's clear why everything is done. Then we want to be thinking through, what do you need to know to do it well? So like what type of knowledge, how in depth? And then the other thing we want to be thinking about, how is that knowledge confirmed and reinforced? What we often see is there's maybe attention to something, but there's no way to confirm it. So then how do we know? And it's oftentimes we leave off at the end of the training instead of over time, how is that knowledge or behavior reinforced? So you'll see that mechanism show up again and again. Behaviors. So this again, remember it's in your mind's eye. Make sure it's very clear what would they be doing if I was watching them so that we don't have it packed into big concepts. What will they be able to do? And be very specific. How does the training build that ability? And how are the new skills again confirmed and reinforced? So you want to be thinking all that through. How are now we're into the results. Again, commonly people are like, we did the training, but we didn't think through the results. How are we going to, what would they be? Meaning, what in the environment should change? What metric, what capability, what in your results should change from this training? How can you tell if the training is successful? How will the results be confirmed or measured? A lot of times, by the way, people get stuck at the measurements. It doesn't have to be a specific number, but it can be just literally how can we monitor in a concrete manner? And then again, is there coaching available to reinforce the skills that yield the results? So meaning, do we just coach them so they can do it, or we coach them until they could get the change in the behaviors to get the right results? Problem solving, again, is a very common example of where people have been trained, gotten some coaching, but they haven't gotten near enough coaching to be able to repeat that skill enough to get through the regular week in, week out results that would come from better problem solving. So just something to be thinking about. The last component of the model that you'll have a tool to go with is engagement. Another common issue with training is it doesn't create enough active learning. And the first training, going back to that state of Illinois experience I had, the training that I was originally replacing was several PowerPoint decks of, key point by key point by key point. And it was just death by PowerPoint. A lot of training can be improved by more levels of engagement. In general, I'm a believer in like an 80-20 type rule, 80% engaged learning to 20% conceptual, if not less conceptual and even more engagement. It's not how fast we give people concepts, it's a matter of how much they're able to absorb it and apply it. So slower on the concepts and heavier on how actively they're trying to actively engage it. One thing we even do sometimes in sessions is give people concepts and have them teach each other the concept. Because again, we learn what we train. So then it's like gives them a way to immediately start figuring out how to train what they're learning about. So here's the tool. This tool covers those key ideas that I just covered. There's 2 pages to it. You're going to have access to this as a PDF and a Word document. I'm asked if you want to change it, I encourage you to change it. Make sure the questions read what you want, put your own logo on it, change the colors, change the words. The purpose of the tool is to give your team a way to discuss, consider, and hit all the key ideas that we've just been talking about and make a plan for them. If it's a new training, then you've thought it through. If it's a current training, you're really getting clear what's on track and what's not on track. So this is a template you can use for yourselves, use them with your teams. And as I said, feel free to change it. The second page of it hits the fourth category. So we had the knowledge, behaviors and result, the first page has knowledge, behaviors, and how we engage the learners. And the last page is the results. Last but not least, there's a few lines for an action plan. What we find is every time a team goes through any kind of training, they'll find 9, 10, 12, 15 things that need to be improved. Just like any continuous improvement, shorten that to just let's make a few changes and then a few more and a few more. So this is not a matter of overwhelming us with what needs to be changed, but talking it through. This can also be used with vendors, internal vendors, external vendors. So we're going to be bringing in training. How do we talk through the entire thing? What's the plan? How are we going to support it? The vendor supplying the training is only a small piece of the work. So how do you make a better plan? And then when the vendor training comes in, it kind of lands because it has a place to land. So there's a place to have an action plan here. So you come up with those very few things are. I think I just have a minute left. I was just going to mention there was a manufacturer we put this in place with. They originally, their train was not sticking at all. They put in a lot more collaborative processes that I've outlined here. What they learned is the more collaborative, the more thoughtful, the more planful, the better. And so since then, the good news is every time their approach got better and stronger, the next round, the next skill, the next application got better and faster, because it's like any skill, you get better at how you do this. So the benefits of this success are, the one thing that makes this very heartening to me is teams believe that new skills matter. They get discouraged when they go through training that doesn't hold up, so they start believing again it'll work. You get the rewards of whatever those new skills are. And then, as I just mentioned, the success of any new skill breeds the knowledge to build any other new skill. So recap, we want to turn challenges into success, foster a learning culture, use a systems approach, and that worksheet hopefully will be helpful to you. And with that, I think we're out of time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cheryl. For everyone, the handouts are in the chat. If you want to scroll up to 10:01, I added it right at the very beginning of the webinar, so you can go ahead and click those links. And if you aren't able to click the links, just send me a quick email and I'll send you the actual copies via email. My email is mary.price@usu.edu. Cheryl, we do have one question in the Q&A. I'm just going to go ahead and ask that really quick. He says, in Agile, we establish communities of practice for the leaders, managers, and Scrum Masters we train. And he's asking, is there any advice on creating and running these?
I don't have a simple answer to that, other than I think the tool, so far from what I've seen, when you even get the teams together, what they describe, what they tell me is having that tool that brings the topics up is super helpful to them. So if what you're saying, if we had agile teams of leaders working on putting in a training or improving one, and it's usually, again, it's not, the reason why I have this up, training is one piece of an intervention. So it has to fit to a full set of things for people to be able to complete something. The setup, our expectations, now we have training, that coaching, that follow-up, the feedback, and the recognition. So we want to be thinking about that more holistically. But those same agile teams, they need sometimes some extra structures or modeling to work from to be able to get them there. And as I said, they could build that model themselves, or you can take that model and amend it, have them edit it, and then they have a mechanism to be able to get there faster and easier on their own.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Before we say goodbye, I just wanted to make a note that Cheryl will be teaching at our 37th annual conference that's coming up here in April. She has 2 workshops. And those workshops are included in the conference fee. So that's something new this year that we want to get as many people involved as possible. So if you haven't already registered, you want to check out the events, go to shingo.org/events, and you can click on the conference right there and learn more about those 2 workshops that she'll be teaching. And Cheryl, once again, thank you so much for presenting.
My pleasure. It was
today.
fun.
It was great, great information. I know I learned a lot. I'm going to look more into your tool as well. So thank you for that personally. With that, everyone, thank you for joining today. And I hope you have a great new year, and we'll see you again next month.